This week, we're going to talk about how to be the church. And as you might guess from the screen, the book of Acts is going to be kind of a guiding light for us. We'll get there in just a little bit. The last 2 weeks have been very important in my mind for who we are as a church. 2 weeks ago, we had a lesson titled No More Normal. And we talked about the fact that we have to kind of say farewell, maybe sadly and with grief, to the way things were. Back in March, we were able to say, well, any day now. And then even through the summer, well, any week or month now. And now it's just, okay, here we are. So let's say our fond condolences to the way things were and talk about what we can do now and for the future. Last week, we said we need to identify our visions, our values, our core identity as a congregation, and to get that stuck in our heads so firmly that whatever choices we make next, we know are based on our identity as a church. And we concluded, and I'm sure you all committed it to memory. Some of you had tattoos done. Some of you, wrote it on sticky notes around the house. I don't know. But I know all of you committed to memory that we're a passion-driven, forward-thinking, spirit-led church. And I know you committed it to memory because I threatened to quiz you on it later, and it could still happen. Matt Fry had the new lapse because he didn't remember it when I caught him. And I'm still saying that's an option. So just kind of put that in your head and have it there. That'll help us going forward. Today, we take one more step in the direction of what's next. And how do we be the church? And why would I ask that question? Before now, when you think about a church and what it is and what it does, it's this organization that is trying to make disciples of Jesus Christ and glorify God. Okay? General terms, that's what we're about. In the past, before now, before the dark times, we had lots of different tools to accomplish that goal. Okay? We had Sunday worship, we had Sunday school classes, we had home teams, we had very specific ministry initiatives going on all over the place, and midweek classes to boot. Kind of like just a whole arsenal of tools at our disposal that we could use to make disciples, bring glory to God, and do the things that churches do. And then what happened? Okay. After the events of the last year, every one of those tools was either canceled or severely changed, so that we had to ask, or do these even exist anymore? Right? Everything that we did that was on our list of here's what this church does came to a screeching halt. Now, if that happens for a week, you say, hey, stuff happens, it was a blip, we're okay. When that starts to add up and you say, it's been 6 months or so, it's been since March, you start to ask a more daunting set of questions. Are we still a church? And I want to say that in the kindest, I fretted about this slide for 2 weeks, because I don't want it to sound negative, like, you guys are failing miserably. But that's not my point. But the question is, at what point, how long could a church not do things churches do and still say, yeah, but we're a church? Right? It was a serious question that I asked myself. And it related to circumstances we have no control over. So I want to make it clear, I'm not being negative and saying you failed as a church. But just ask the question, if this goes on for another 6 months, if, crazy scenario, just please understand, if for a decade we did what we've been doing for the last 6 months, at what point would you say, is that a church? I mean, you ask some questions. I think you might could say yes. You could say, well, we could carry on the best we could. And I think God would honor and appreciate that, to be perfectly honest with you. But my question was kind of, that was my answer to the question, are we a church? Not in the way we recognize, not in the way we think of it normally, and not even in the way we want to be. We've been surviving, but not thriving, right? We've been doing the best we can, and God bless us for that. But that's a struggle. Are we still making disciples? Again, same question. I like to think, unless everyone's lying to me, there are people out there watching our videos, content online, and tuning in and engaging in different ways. And I like to think that whenever you preach the gospel, people are touched by that and shaped by that and develop and they become disciples. But are we making disciples? Is anybody becoming a Christian or growing as a Christian due to the things we're doing as a church right now? And my answer was, barely. I think it's happening. But under the most optimistic view of the last 6 months, we would describe it as kind of on life support. Again, I just want to say one more time, because I don't want you to miss it. I don't mean that negatively. It's just been a fact of our circumstances. And I would like to change it. I can't change circumstances. I would love for today's lessons to be called The Cure for COVID-19. But I don't have that lesson in my arsenal. Sorry. Try something else. But what we can do is start talking about what is it that we are able to do. And another question, which I think is actually a better question, that I asked in the last few weeks of myself, are we willing to wait for the right circumstances to be the church again? Again, when I thought this will be a few weeks, I thought, okay, we're just hitting pause, and we'll get there. But as it's drug out, I thought, we're going to have to figure out how to do church things in new ways, because we can't wait until the circumstances are right. For one thing, the circumstances will never be right. This is a biblical message. Ecclesiastes 11 and verse 4 has this statement: "He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap." In the ESV, that's kind of vague, but if you get some other more paraphrase-oriented translations, it makes it even stronger what that proverb is trying to say. The New Living Translation says, "Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest." And the Good New Translation goes a step further. "If you wait for perfect conditions, you will never get anything done." And that really is the message of that verse. And I had to kind of convince myself of that. I'm speaking to it personally. I don't know where you're at. But personally, I had to convince myself that just waiting for things to be better again was a silly enterprise. Time had showed me that it wasn't just a matter of another day or another week or even another month. We just didn't know. So, why wait? And then based on last week's lesson, the even better question, the best question is, in these current circumstances, how would a passion-driven, forward-thinking, spirit-led church respond? And what would we do? Today I have call it a plan, it might be more a proposal, plan-ish. How about that, right? It's the kind of thing that you say, let's try something and see what happens. And it starts with, the best place to start with any church-related plan is the Bible. When you think about a church that's having to kind of reboot itself, or in this case I'm going to give you, start from scratch, the template will always be the book of Acts. How a small little group of Jesus followers changed the whole world. And how did they do it? Something interesting happens when you read the book of Acts, is you find out the model of ministry and church work in the book of Acts was shockingly simple. Acts chapter 2, verse 46, this is at the end of the Sermon on Pentecost, "And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received the food with glad and generous hearts." All of the ministry that happened in Acts chapter 2 is described as happening in basically two spaces. In the temple, a public space, and in people's homes. Real simple, right? That's chapter 5 and verse 42. "And every day in the temple and from house to house, they did not cease teaching and preaching that Christ is Jesus." And then towards the end of the book, chapter 20, verse 27, "How I did not shrink from the declaring to anything that was profitable and teaching you in public, house to house." All the ministry that exists in the book of Acts, the ministry that changed the world, existed in two spaces. They used whatever public space was available to them based on the circumstances, and they used people's homes. And that was it. Two things. Public or big church. Did you ever call that when you were a kid? Like when you left Bible class? Go to a big church. Okay, so we'll do that. Public or big church, right? What we're kind of doing right now. The formal assembly of the saints, right? And then these small groups, or what we might call house churches. What term you want to put on it, I leave to your discernment. I've been thinking all week of what's the right way to call that one too, but it's these small groups that met in houses and were the church in that house, and are often described that way. That was it. They did everything they accomplished and changed the world using those two models, those two tools. So when I think of what our church could be doing in the months ahead, and I'd like to give it a shot, is then to see that in the book of Acts and try to keep it simple. Simple is a good thing. Simple's not a bad word, okay? Do you remember the great cell phone wars of the last decade? What would be the cell phone people would use? Okay. First there was the BlackBerry. Remember the BlackBerry? It had like a bazillion buttons. And it had the little soccer ball thing in the middle so you could scroll around, and everyone thought they were really cool. And then Steve Jobs says, yeah, we can do better. And he brought into the world the first iPhone. And it had one button. And then, what did they do with that one button? They took it away too. I don't even have a button. Right? Which one won? Anybody in here have a BlackBerry or a BlackBerry with them? Right? That kind of became non-standard, and the simpler, less bells and whistles device that was capable of doing lots of things, right? You could do anything you wanted with that device, but in terms of the interface, one button and a screen. Simple one, because simple works, that's my point. Simple works. So when I look at the book of Acts and I say, hey, they were really effective and they had two tools at their disposal, I think, why add more buttons, right? Maybe we just start there and see what we can accomplish. What if we simplified our church down to just these two components? Funny thing is, we've kind of had to, right? Circumstances said you can't do a whole million things that you'd like to do with a whole bulletin full of activities every week. It's not an option. Okay, that's fine. Church works without all that. It's great when you can do it, but simplicity works. What if we said we're going to have public spaces for as long as we're able to do it under the circumstances? In March, we didn't get any saving. And time might come again where we don't get any saving. But for as long as we're able, and it seems feasible for people to do it, we'll have a public space. And we need to find a way to make use of these smaller spaces for growing as disciples of Jesus Christ. So my proposal today, you can call it what you want, is basically this. Let's start some house churches. Let's do it now. Now you can call it small groups. You guys used to call it home teams. The only reason I'm not calling it home team today is because I don't want you to think, oh, we're reforming our home team. That group of people may or may not ever get back together, right? We're having to kind of think of it from scratch a little bit. But we do need some small groups. We need the church of that house. We need that size cellular group to exist in this church, because that's the kind of thing that can survive even when you throw the switch and turn the other part off. We were really caught kind of off guard in March and did the best we could. But we didn't have a strong infrastructure of small groups to check in on each other. Some of those home teams did the best they could and kind of check in and are still doing that. God bless you for it. But having that infrastructure, I think, is going to be essential in the days and weeks and maybe months and maybe years ahead. And it has the added benefit of being biblical. Now some of you are thinking, yeah, are we allowed to do that kind of thing? What are the rules? So I spent a day on the CDC website reading things way above my pay grade, doing the best I could to understand the most recent thresholds and guidelines they gave us. A lot of churches are still reading the ones from back in March, April, May. The ones in July are actually more helpful in describing things that churches can actually do. And so I made some slides. Why not? This is the CDC section of today's sermon. Okay. First of all, the CDC says, in general, there are 4 risk categories when it comes to doing any kind of interpersonal relationship. The lowest possible risk, they call it low risk, I call it zero risk, would be the virtual-only activities. I really got a chuckle because they call that low risk. If any of you get COVID-19 from an email, I want to know about it, because that would be newsworthy. But anyway, we're going to call that the lowest possible risk is virtual online only. Okay, and we're trying to provide that service here as a church. Second, one step up is smaller outdoor and/or in-person gatherings in that scenario. And then, as you can guess, medium risk would be medium-sized in-person gatherings, and then large convention-sized gatherings are the highest risk. When we're talking about small groups, what are we talking about? We're only talking about the top 2. Small groups could operate virtually. We have lots of technology now for interacting online in groups, or we could literally sit in somebody's living room and be a small gathering of people. And we'd still be in the bottom half of the risk pool, or even the lowest quantity, depending on where you want to be, where you are personally, where you feel safe. how many guests, they have a whole page titled Planning Preparedness, and it says how many guests can safely attend a conference, sporting event, or other community event. And here's their answer. CDC says, the CDC does not have a limit or recommend a specific number of attendees for these types of events, and instead encourages event organizers to focus on ways to permit or to limit people's contact with each other. Each event organizer will need to determine the appropriate number for their setting in collaboration with local health officials. They should also check state, county, city rules regarding any current restrictions for limiting the number of attendees at events. What I liked about that, early on, they tried to give us numerical guidelines. And I'm glad we were hungry, like for any information, tell us what to do, please. And they tried to give us numbers. But more recently, in July, they recognized that there was no one-size-fits-all number that would fit for every situation. So they said, we're getting rid of the number, and here's what we're saying. Use some common sense. Oh, how dangerous that is. Use some common sense and figure out how many people can reasonably distance in the space you have in mind. And then do that. If there are city guidelines, Ada currently has a mask policy, follow those guidelines to the best of your ability, but by and large, use some good sense. They go on to say, in general, the number that is chosen should allow individuals to remain at least 6 feet apart from each other, rather than focusing on an ideal number. Event organizers and administrators should focus on the ability to reduce and limit contact between attendees, staff, and others. In general, the more people you interact with, the more closely you interact with them, and the longer that interaction, the higher your risk of getting and spreading COVID-19. Kind of good sense, right? So that is actually a helpful guideline to me, because that gives us considerable freedom, if we'll use some good sense, to safely decide, kind of in our own context, what is the right way to go about getting together in smaller groups. And then they added another page, which I thought was really great, that was specifically how to host an event or gathering. And they say, things like outdoor barbecues or in-home get-togethers and family activities. They say, here's some guidelines. And again, pretty helpful. Number one, remind guests to stay home if they are sick. I'd like to put that again in the common sense category. That's always been a good idea. Okay? You are not doing us any favors by bringing the plague. But it's especially true now. If you're sick, stay home. And that's going to be true whether we do small groups or big groups or whatever we do. Encourage social distancing, right? Wherever there's an option to stand a little further apart, do so, okay? Wear masks, that's what the CDC recommends, that's what they ask of us. Clean hands often. Another one that I would suggest is probably a good idea anyway, right? It's a strange world and age when you have to tell people to wash their hands. Limit the number of people handling or serving food. Again, I kind of like that rule anyway. If you hand me a plate of food and stick your finger in it first, I'm not going to be thrilled. Okay, well, it's more true now. And then limit contact with commonly touched surfaces and shared items. All kind of common sense things, right? Nothing crazy here. And that's their guidelines for having in-home meetings or outdoor backyard meetings and cookouts and things like that. All of that is very doable. None of it is draconian. None of it would prevent us from meeting in small groups if we chose to do so. You could do it pretty safely using those guidelines in a pretty healthy way and not even feel like you've been encroached upon. Well, basically, the sum total of the CDC is this: smaller groups are safer than bigger groups. And so we're saying, actually, that makes sense to us. That's exactly what the church does. In the book of Acts, the church functioned really well, making use of lots of smaller groups where it wasn't convenient to have one giant group. Okay? In fact, I can make a further case that from the Bible we could make this statement: house churches are better than no churches. Yeah, I'm a guy who loves a big auditorium full of people, just like the next guy, right? Every preacher wants 7,000 people to show up and hear the preacher. But in the scenario where we can't have that, having some churches that exist on this smaller scale as part of a large whole is better than not having churches. And again, the Bible overwhelmingly says that. Romans 16:3-5, greet Prisca and Aquila, who we know as Priscilla and Aquila. Greet also the church in their house. 1 Corinthians 16:19, the churches of Asia send you greetings. Aquila and Prisca, together with the church in their house, send you hearty greetings in the Lord. Colossians 4:15, give my greetings to the brothers at Laodicea and to Nympha and the church in her house. Philemon 1 and verse 2, there's a lot of Philemon
2. But Philemon, verse 2, and Apphia, our sister, and Archippus, our fellow soldier, and the church in your house. Okay? Like you read all of the portions of the epistles we skip, right? We never read the part with the names because it's kind of boring. If you actually slow down and read that, over and over again, Paul sends these letters and he says, make sure you acknowledge those folks over there in that house. Because that's how these small churches were organized. There was a sense of we're all one church. But due to the circumstances, some of it was persecution, some of it was the fact they didn't own a multi-million-dollar church building auditorium. They just found it better to meet in small groups quite often, wherever possible. So, what could a house church / small group, again, call it whichever term fits better, I haven't decided which, but what could they do in our current scenario? Anybody a Dr. Seuss fan? One of my favorites growing up was Green Eggs and Ham, and so I'm just going to make use of that today. In Green Eggs and Ham, there's lots of options. I think today, if you recognize there's 4 or 5 basic things a small church does, you get to the idea that there's lots of ways to do that. A small group, small church, house church could worship together. Literally using this exact stream that's going out today. And I know you can do it because we did it in March. We figured out how to do it. Okay. We can just expand that circle a little bit. You can learn together. We can have small Bible studies and online material that we share and watch together or whatever. We can serve together. We can find people in that group or outside of that group that have a need, and we can meet those needs through service. We can care together and check in on each other so nobody feels isolated. Those sound like the things a church does. And every one of those can be done in a small group house church setting. Simple idea, lots of variety. You get to use your creativity to figure out how best to organize and orchestrate that with the church providing you the resources you need. Would you form a small group in a house? Would you form a small group with a mouse? Right? However you can figure out how to do it. You want to use Google Hangouts, you want to use Zoom, you want to use Google Classroom, do it. You want to open up your house, your back deck, your backyard, do it. My father-in-law, Craig, is here with me today. During one of these months, I don't remember which one it was, came over to the house, and he says, oh, hang on, I got to do my Bible study. I don't see your Bible class here. And he goes into our guest bedroom, and he pulls out this device. It's a crazy device. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a telephone. Telephone's first phone company was developed in 1877, so this is cutting-edge technology. Okay? And he started a phone call, and he had a Bible class with 20 to 25 people on a group call. And I'm sure it was absolute chaos. What'd you say, Craig? I mean, I'm sure it was the wildest experience possible. But the point is, there were people, several of them older, who realized maybe the Zoom video camera thing wasn't going to work for them, but they could use a telephone. And so they put together a Bible class on a telephone. And it worked. I mean, people found value in that. And that's my point. You have the options. You have more creativity than any one person ever would to come up with new and exciting ways to get together in these groups in ways that fit your own personal criteria for safety and health. Group design, ideally, what is a small group? It would be somewhere between 8 and 20 people. If it gets much bigger than 20, it stops being small, and you really do start having some trouble with the health guidelines at that point. Any less than 8, it's mostly just you in a room. Like if your group is so small that one person doesn't show up and there's no group, your group is too small. But somewhere in between there, right, is a healthy group size. It could be all the people in one family. Right? Some of you are watching the stream at home saying, I'm not ready yet to interact with lots of different people from lots of different settings. A family of 4 and their grandparents makes 6. Right? I mean, it doesn't take much to put together a group, and it can even be the people in one household that are quarantining together. It could be open to others. Say, well, I'd like to do this, but I don't know 8 people. We'll help you find 7 or 10 more. Right? Because there's going to be people who'd like to attend. You can invite non-members. Here's a crazy idea. We could spread the gospel this way. It doesn't have to be people who attend here. It could be people you'd like to attend here. Invite them over. Right? This is possible. Where are they going to meet? Where would you like to meet? Would you eat it in a train? Would you eat it in the rain? You can do it in a home. We'd be happy to open up one of our larger classroom spaces here at the church. Just let us know. We need a space. I got 10 people who want to do a Bible study. Naomi's going to say, what time? We'll figure out a way to get you in there. You can meet at the park. Outdoor is always better than in, as long as weather permits. It's 94 degrees outside, I'm just thrilled. But in the fall, it's going to be a great option. You can meet in public spaces wherever possible. You can meet virtually, whatever option. You can meet on the telephone. Time. You can worship together. Some of the folks, I think, that aren't here this morning, who aren't comfortable being back in this space, will find that this is a great way to work together virtually at home on Sunday mornings or sometime during the day on Sunday. But there's no reason these groups otherwise than that have to be even on a Sunday. If your group wants to get together and study the Bible on Tuesday night, I guarantee you it's allowed. Right? Yeah, we know our worship happens on Sunday and that this is the time set aside for that, but our groups can meet anytime it makes sense to do so. Okay? I would encourage you to meet weekly, so there's consistency. Also, I want to say when we look to these groups, we're not looking for teachers. I think it's one of the big hang-ups when you talk about small groups or house churches, that everyone assumes you've got to be like a biblical savant and to start a group. And let me tell you how low the threshold can be for this. We're looking for hosts, not teacher. I stole this acronym from Saddleback. It's a good acronym. We want people with a heart for people who are willing to open the doors to a space and say, y'all come in here. Serve a snack or not. And turn on the video. If you can do those four things, and the last one is push play, then you can have a home team. You can have a small group, a house church. You can accomplish that, right? We're not looking you to become a shepherd of the flock. We're looking you to help us get some people together and be church together and find some ways to do this during the week. How's the church going to get support for this? The church here, the ministry staff, and everybody here that we have available, we're going to provide you with content. You say, hey, I want to start a group, but I don't know what we're going to watch. I don't know what we're going to do for our study. We're going to have online material. I'm going to tell you more about that. It's going to start up in a big way in September. I decided rather than start in the middle of the month. In September, we're going to have some content online for you to do this with. If you want the video, you want an outline, you say, I can't use the interwebs, we'll get you a DVD. We will find a way to get you the content you need. If you need training and guidelines, I'd like to do it. I don't know how. Again, happy to tell you how to push play or whatever information you need. You need tech support, I'll make someone else do it, but we'll get it for you. You need space, I'd love to do it. My house isn't big enough. We'll find some space here at the church. You say, I'd love to do it, but nobody likes me. We'll find you 7 people, right? If you want to start some kind of group and help this church to thrive, we can help you do that over the next few weeks. It's just a matter of willingness on your part. I'm also going to suggest that we do this for a short duration. I had a conversation with Vinny the other day, and we noticed something very similar about our experiences in church. When you sign up for things in church, it's kind of a lifetime sentence. Right? If you say, I'll teach this month, that usually means you're going to teach for the next 19 years. Or I'll do a home team, that usually means you're going to have a home team for the rest of your life, until your house burns down. Okay. I want to suggest to you we can do it differently. We could do this kind of on a trimester system. 3 months on, 1 month off, 3 months on. And all you're agreeing to is, I think I can do this for 3 months. If you're like Benny and you're having knee surgery, have knee surgery, right? Probably he shouldn't be running a small group while he's in the hospital. Can we all amen that? Yes, okay. That was pretty self-evident. So for that trimester, he says, I can't have a group. We got lots of other people doing groups. If you don't like your group, isn't that always fun? Wow, this is really awkward. I don't like this at all. Just wait out 3 months. You can join a different group. Okay? And so by doing that, it creates, it can be as permanent as you want. If you like your group, get back in the same group in 3 months or another month. But it gives us some flexibility to experiment a little bit with the group and allows us to fail. Failure is an important thing when you're a Christian. If you wait for the right circumstances, it never happens. Instead, we're going to allow ourselves the opportunity to fail. Do this for 3 months, and then let's reevaluate, and then we'll try another 3 months. Now let's see what happens. So my goals today, and I like concrete goals. Here are my goals for today. I want to form 30 small groups in the month of August, because it's about 3 weeks. I'd like to get about 30 folks that say, I would be willing to do some version of that. And start putting that together with the goal that in September, when I have the curriculum built and ready to go for these classes anyway, your groups would be ready to roll. September, August, November, We break for December because none of you want to do anything in December anyway, and we evaluate the plan for the new year. 3-month pilot program, but it needs volunteers. I'd also like it to be ready to go in September. I know that's short notice, but hey, why not? Why wait for the clouds to be ready? I also want 100% participation. I know that's a crazy goal. That's the craziest thing on the screen. But let me tell you, this is the standard model. Big church has 100% of your church in it, and then your small groups have 20%. Have you noticed that we're kind of upside down right now? We might only be able to have 30% of our church here. Why should we settle then for that same number being involved in small groups? What if we said the Central Church of Christ is this bigger number? It is all the people meeting in all the ways, online and other formats, all across town, all of these different things. That's our church. And we know only a portion of them are going to feel comfortable in this space on Sunday morning due to the circumstances. But we're going to have everybody connected to the church in some way. And that's the goal. Because that was the original question. Are we a church? If we're a disconnected group of people who vaguely know each other, then the answer is no. But if we can get connected in new and exciting ways, creative ways, we can be the church, we can be a better church than we've ever been. There's no stopping what this level of creativity could do. So today, here's your steps. Pray about this. It might be a crazy idea. Pray about it anyway. God likes crazy ideas. Volunteer to be a host. Think about it. I could have 8, 10, 12 people either in my home or some other space, or Ben, if you tell me how I try it, think about that. Take the next week or so and start thinking about whether you could do that with a small group of people. If you're not willing to be a host, I completely understand. I only need 30. Consider what type of group you want to be a part of, because you want to be part of that 100%. Would you prefer to meet with a group that only met virtually? Would you prefer to meet with a group that met here at the building? Would you prefer to meet with a group that met at somebody's home? Be thinking about that, and we'll find ways to get you connected. But more importantly than anything else, number 4, commit to helping this church thrive, not merely survive. I said this 2 weeks ago, and I said last week, and say it again. I want us to stop thinking about how we're going to survive this. That is a death sentence. Survival ends one way. But there is another option. In fact, there's more options than we can dream of. And we're going to throw some darts at the wall until one of them hits the target. And we're going to say this church is going to continue to grow and to thrive and to do better and be stronger and to reach more people with the gospel than it ever has before. Because why shouldn't it? Because that's the pattern we were given. That's the story of Acts. And that's what we can be. We can be the church. Would you bow with me in a word of prayer? Our Father and our God, we commit our times and our plans to your hands. Whatever you would want to succeed, make it thrive. If you wish something to fail, we know it will fail. Lord, we pray that faith and earnestness and sincerity will be what you wish us to do. Help us to be faithful in new circumstances. Help us to be open to where you would lead us. And in all things, give us the courage of your Son, who went to the cross and endured hardship to bring good to others, the greatest good that we have in him. This we pray in the name of Jesus Christ.